And welcome back to the number one podcast in the sport where Uncle Don has finally had his say. Not just on the fight, but on everything. And I think it was important that he got to have his say, because I don't think the public have really understood the pain that he sort of toiled and worked under for a long, long time. If you followed the pod long enough, I've dropped the breadcrumbs often enough just to explain that situation and to say there are allegations Derek didn't pay him in some cases, and in other cases didn't pay what was agreed. And there are all sorts of these allegations of people being told, if you work with Don, I'm not going to sign you. I'm going to put you with this trainer, that trainer. And so Don's got his moment in the sun. He's a trainer of a world champion, and he got to have his say. And let's come back onto that, actually, because I think there's a lot to go through in terms of the interviews he's done since the fight. But people are really here because I need to do that kind of sweep up of the whole card and look at the card holistically now, which is a good idea, because I kind of zeroed in on Joshua versus Dubois. But let's start there, because for anyone that's new listening, it makes sense. I mean, this is the thing you probably came for. But now when we look back on that fight, we see the reality. And I said it in the previous episode. This is how Joshua wants to box. He wants to be a gunslinger. He wants to be a guy that has timing and is a sharpshooter and knocks people out with clean, accurate punches. That's who he wants to be. Now, that's not necessarily who his training team want him to be. We don't know one way or the other. I've spoken to a couple of the guys that were around him, and I understand why they are naturally defensive of their trainer and of their fellow fighter in Joshua. But my point will always be, when you have the love and affection of the fans, you have to understand that same energy can turn against you. And that love that you received with open arms can be the same hate you have to receive with open arms. You know, the world is binary like that. That energy which you receive, you shall have to give one day, and vice versa. And we've all been through that. You know, we all talk tough, and then life humbles us. And this is just a situation where that Ben Davidson Performance Center has to eat its humble pie. In terms of the overall thing, I heard rumors that Joshua was in tears in that changing room, and they didn't want him to do the press conference because they were worried that he'd have another moment like he did when he broke down. But he seemingly can't understand why he's doing everything and it's not working. So his argument is, I'm doing everything that people are asking me to do, and I'm not getting the results that I need. And so what's happened is he's gone through and gone, I've changed trainers. I've gone to different countries. I've sparred different people. I've been in different environments. The same thing happens every time. But no one around him is brave enough to go, you're the problem. Until you deal with your issues, until you deal with your desire to be loved. But not only that, but you want to define the parameters of that love. Until you deal with that, you will always struggle. That's what I'd say about AJ. Because what we have to say is, that guy took British boxing to another level. I think the energy that Froch Groves 2 gave us, AJ's taken it on to another level. He's still the money man outside of Canelo. He's still the guy that can fill stadiums. And with the right fights, I think he will fill stadiums. Like I've said, his run to retirement should be Jarrell Miller, good fun fight. Those two will make the build-up will be worth it in itself. So AJ Miller, both vulnerable. AJ Ruiz, AJ Dillian, and if that's not enough, then finish off with Fury. But he doesn't need to fight anyone for belts. Now it's not about progression and legacy. Now this is just about giving us some of the fights we wanted, right? They're all vulnerable, so it's not a question of, it's going to be this, it's going to be that. I don't want to hear any talk about, they're all washed up. No, that's not the point. Because we've been talking for a long time. As fans, do we want to be entertained? Do we want to see guys slugging it out? Do we want to see knockdowns? Do we want to see people getting knocked from one side of the ring to the other? Or do we want these legacy chasing fights where everyone takes zero risk and then just tell you the belts they've won? If we want to be entertained, then these are the fights we should be calling for. Because as long as Joshua stays in the sport, he has to have someone to fight. So I'd really like to see that. From the Dubois side of things, from what I heard in the dressing room, the energy was positive. Everything looks positive. But until I hear the dad mention Don and Don mention the dad, I don't feel like everyone's on the same page for the same reasons I outlined earlier. You know, Don likes to be the biggest dog in his yard, quite rightly. You know, that converted barn is yours. And Daniel's dad wants to be the big dog when it comes to his son. And at some point between those two war horses, like some kind of order has to be established. But it's tricky. See, when you're a trainer to a high value commodity like Daniel, you can't always do what you want to do because you need the money. You need the money, you need the cachet, you need the kudos. Daniel being in the gym draws a certain caliber of person to the gym. Yeah, and it helps elevate the people who are already there. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, Don's waited so long to be in this position, he ain't going to give it up. And I don't blame him. Like, he's deserved this for a long, long time when people have doubted him. And I know for absolute certain there are other trainers that were approaching his fighters going, come on, man, this guy's shit. You can't train with him, man. He doesn't know what he's doing. I know that was happening. So he's well entitled to have this moment. I think for Daniel, the elephant in the room is this. Nobody wanted him to win. Nobody wanted Daniel to be where he is right now. The economics of it don't make sense. Everything was set up for Joshua to win. The only reason that belt was vacated was so AJ had a belt. That was the only reason that belt was vacated. It wasn't vacated because it was the right thing to do. It was for that. Usyk was like, I'll give you the belt, AJ. Thank me later. And Daniel said, no, I'm still here. I'm going to kick the chessboard up in the air. Now you guys have to deal with me. Now you guys have to deal with my dad. Now you guys have to deal with the Bowers family. Good luck. And so what we saw in the aftermath of that was this kind of, all the kind of heavyweights we've lost interest in, all piping up, wanting to get involved. And of all of those, the only one I had any interest in was Joe Joyce, because like Joe's got a legitimate claim where Joe's like, I don't know if he can beat me. I imagine if you're Joe Joyce, you're like, I don't know if he can beat me. You know, let me get my head right. Let me take some time out. I'm going to come looking for him. But I don't think he can beat me. And he's got a belt. And I can see them giving Dubois someone like Joe and saying, oh, we want to give him the super fight. Yeah. But then you don't want to give Joe the super fight either, because that doesn't sell. So what we're going to see, depending on what happens next, is are they trying to take the belt off Daniel or keep the belt on Daniel? I think you keep the belt on Daniel. Just the longevity, the fact that there's no one of his generation at that level. So he is the future of the heavyweight. He's like the bridge between what's there now and what's about to come. We need him to be kind of where he is now. Kind of vibes of Mike Tyson in about 1988, where there were guys coming through, but they weren't there yet, and Mike was holding it down until those guys made it. From the main event, the other MVP from the main event is Shane McGuigan. So the Radio 5 clip came out of him, I think he's sort of assessing Ben Davidson's comments at the end of round 4. And the words that he used obviously turned out to be prescient. Now, people are going to say, yeah, Shane's a genius, he's this, he's that. No, do you know what? Number one, let's salute Shane McGuigan for being on a media outlet of some scale and saying it like he sees it. It's rare that someone comes out and goes, that's really bad advice. That's terrible. Like, why would you do that? I love that. I absolutely love that, because too often everyone plays nicely with each other. I think Shane did it. And not only did he do that, but he backed it up with his own interpretation of the situation. Having worked with Daniel, he knows. And because of that, it gave it that added insight. But that was a great moment as well, where he gave that insight into how coaches think of things. I was talking about this the other day, and I was trying to explain. We don't necessarily see fights the same way fans do. See, when you're a fan, like, you don't consume as much boxing as coaches do. Like, just in general, video, in the flesh, whatever. Like, you know, you can be sat there watching like an 18-year-old Kazakh sometimes. Like, fans don't generally have that level. I know people try and tell me they're hardcores, they do it. Yeah, whatever. But here's the thing. When you're a trainer, you kind of watch a fight as if you're watching it from the top. You're more concerned with the kind of the ebbs and the flows. There's like an ebb and a flow to a fight that you almost ignore, but you know is happening. And what you zero in on are the anomalies. Like when something is said or something is done where you're like, no, that doesn't make any sense. That's kind of when you zero in on particular moments. But generally you watch this ebb and flow and you get a feel for where a fight is. And that's why when people say, well, why are these scorecards not like I see it? It's because most fans are judging the micro. What's happening? Ooh, he got the better of that exchange. He got the better of that exchange. But they're not seeing that kind of wider picture. And that wider picture includes things like, what's this taking out of person X? You know, how much is this draining them? How much is this affecting their fitness? How much is this affecting them psychologically? So there's a big macro thing that you're trying to pick up on, and you can't stop doing it as a trainer. You're almost like you're in there with it. You're just flowing with it until you detect those anomalies, and you can just pick up on them straight away. And I assume that's what Shane did. He's probably there going, if I was in Ben's situation, what would I be saying? And then he hears something, and he goes, oh, why would you be getting him to throw an uppercut? Like, he's in no state to be throwing that. And he was right. I always look at an uppercut as a secondary punch, in that it needs something else significant to happen before you throw it. Yeah. And you'd have thought that the world's best British trainer would have known that. And I'm just going to pause for a second and go, so what do we make of Ben Davidson? The film study stuff had people kind of in their Adam Booth mode, right? Oh man, this guy's taking boxing to another level. All that film study stuff, all the trainers are lazy stuff. Yeah, all that stuff was said. And we're this far down the line, and I'm yet to see a guy that he's taken and made elite. McCormack brothers box like they did when they were amateurs. Lee Wood boxed like he did before Ben. Joshua boxed like he did before Ben. Congo like he did before Ben. Yeah, we're struggling at this point to go, what's Ben really doing? And it comes to a point. I was talking to another trainer, maybe he doesn't want his name known, but I said, I judge a coach, I judge a trainer by his ability to get a performance. And that's why when I saw Dennis Dugdale was trained by his mum, I wasn't upset by that. When James Kirkland's trained by Ann Wolf, I'm not upset by that, because if they can get the performance out of those guys that no one else can, that's 80% of it. A lot of these guys you see that are clever trainers and this, that, and the third can't get performances out of their fighter. Adam Booth is an example. That's why I called him the hoax. And I'll stand by that. I'll say that to his face. Adam Booth is the hoax. I don't want Ben Davison to end up being known as the hoax. And for that, he has to get performances out of his fighter. We're yet to see it, but it's not impossible for him. I think the challenge he's got is, as they say in Zimbabwe, he hasn't drunk enough beer yet. So that's an expression, you know, like when you're too young for something, it's like you haven't drunk enough beer, you haven't made enough mistakes, you haven't fallen over enough, you haven't embarrassed yourself enough to have the experience to do what it is you claim you're doing. And Ben will realize that. Like his time will come. He's just got to live a bit. Just broadly speaking in life, he's got to live. He's got to work out how to inspire people. He's like he would be well served coaching amateurs on the side. Because then he'd know what parts of his character were inspirational to people. And then he could just leverage that and become a real force in the coaching world. Because I'd like him to be, man. I don't have any animosity towards Ben Davison. I'm just talking like if you look at what the scorecard is telling us, he's not having a good couple of years. It's as simple as that. Not relative to what he said he was and what the media were telling us he was. And then on the subject of young coaches, I just want to talk about Kieran Farrell quickly, because I got pulled up on Facebook about some of the stuff I said about him. Now, there's a well-respected tradition in boxing. The head trainer gets all the credit. And then what the head trainer does is he sprinkles the credit across his team, right? And he'll thank everybody. And that's how you get to know who the young trainers are. So Don Charles gets all the credit as head trainer. And what will Don do? Don will say, I want to thank Ian, Tony Pill, Kieran Farrell, Samuel Etty. I'm missing someone, apologies. But he will shine light on them. And then you go and go, who are these guys, right? That's how the credit system works in boxing. Whoever's name is above the door gets all the credit. Do people really believe Emmanuel Stewart trained every fighter he was associated with? Do people really believe Emmanuel Stewart trained every Kronk fighter every minute of every day? No. There were guys in the Kronk gym like Bill Miller. Yeah, there were loads of coaches in there that were helping Emmanuel Stewart. What Emmanuel was able to do was provide that kind of experienced oversight to make sure everyone's pulling in the right direction. But he gave credit when credit was due. But we look at these guys as Emmanuel Stewart fighters. Why? The Kronk is his gym. There were kids who were trained by John Ingle. There were kids who were trained by Dominic Ingle. But they were Ingle fighters and they came under the banner of Brendan Ingle because it's his gym. That's how boxing works. So when someone asks me a question like, why would I not give Kieran Farrell credit instead of Don Charles? This is a stupid question. I can talk about Kieran Farrell and I can say, do you know what? Kieran Farrell's a young coach. He's up and coming. He's in a good environment to learn. But Kieran Farrell's not a guy that can stand front and center right now. Like, there's no way we can have a boxing community that says Ben Davidson's too young and hasn't served enough of an apprenticeship, and then say, Kieran Farrell's done all this, that, and the other. And yes, people are going to talk about his record and stuff, but I don't want to do that because then we've got to talk about people like Amy Timlin, who never looked like she was a professional boxer. Never. And we all saw the videos, that stuff is not coaching. Coaching is the ability to get a performance or a result out of someone. That's why people have life coaches, career coaches, because there's a result that they want. 10 years from now, could Kieran Farrell be the best trainer in this country? Could he be the guy getting all the credit? 1,000,000%. And I would support that. I support Kieran Farrell in his journey. I don't think Kieran Farrell's the problem. I think it's people who don't know anything about boxing talking up their mate. But what they do is they disrespect boxing and they disrespect Don Charles. And the reason I say that is, imagine if Dubois had lost. Yeah, it shouldn't be with Don. Like, no wonder Derek left Don. Yeah, I can see why. I can see why Joshua never worked with Don. You know what? It wouldn't have been Kieran Farrell. Kieran Farrell would have been immune from the criticism because he's not accountable. Don is accountable. And when you're fully accountable, you get all the glory. And once you have all the glory, you decide who else gets glory. It's that simple. That's how this game works. That's what this game's built on. And people can fight it as much as they want. You can't escape the truth. But let's spin it back to a coach I love to poke in the chest every so often, Adam Booth. What's happening with Josh Kelly? Yeah, the fight with Ishmael Davis was a bit closer than it should have been. What was it? Was it a split or a majority decision? I can't even remember now. But Josh won. And people are telling me it should have been 10 rounds to 2, 9 rounds to 3. And I'm like, I can see it being 8-4, 7-5. And the reason is, and this is going to be Josh's problem at middleweight, those punches don't put a dent in anyone. You could hear Ishmael Davis's punches landing. You couldn't really hear Josh's. And this is what I mean when people score fights. They look at this eye-catching, flashy stuff and they go, that must score more than punches that are literally making Josh breathe heavy. Like, what the hell was that? When Ishmael Davis was landing, he was putting holes in Josh Kelly. You could hear it. No escaping that. You could hear it. Thud, 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 thud. When Josh was hitting with ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta, amateur stuff. And I don't even think it's a desire to be a pity-patty puncher, pitter-pat, I should say. I just don't think he carries a power up that way. And if you think back to Rio 2016, and that's how far back we have to go to see him look anywhere near talented. Even then, when the pressure got hot for him, he couldn't do it. Now, I'm not going to blame all of that on Adam Booth, but if Adam Booth was the trainer that people keep telling me he is, Josh would be in a better place than he is now. I don't want to hear this talk about injuries and stuff. For a long time, Josh's lifestyle wasn't where it needed to be, and he'd admit that. Right? That was part of it. But just his limitations. And the thing is, as he gets older, that flash stuff can't work. Just, he's not going to be as mobile. And he's going to face better people than Ishmael Davis. He's going to face people able to cut those lanes of escape off and hit him really hard. So I worry about what he can do. I think it's harder to do that sort of stuff against Liam Smith, but those two won't fight each other now. Liam pulling out has given them an easy out where they don't have to fight Liam Smith, because I think even an old Liam Smith would take Josh Kelly for a walk. Eubank Jr. would take Josh Kelly for a walk. Hamza Shiras would take him for a walk. And if he had to fight one of those guys, you'd see him drop back down to 154, because there's no one really operating at 154 that's going to give him trouble. Although I'd like to see what he did with someone like a Lee Cutler, for example. Could he do anything decent against a Lee Cutler? Probably outclass him, but Lee's tough. But in terms of Josh Kelly, I don't think he gave the kind of performance that warrants another Riyadh season card. I don't think he's at that level. Like, he should just be main eventing Channel 5, if I'm being honest. Let's talk about Mark Chamberlain versus Josh Padley. Now, Mark Chamberlain's been one of Turkey's darlings, right? And they were talking about this just being a stepping stone to a big fight in December. God, those wheels came off fast. I think that's the definition of a shit show of a fight. Now, the thing with Mark Chamberlain as a southpaw had always been he could manage his distance well. So he was never really in a position to be countered, but he was hitting people because he's got quite long levers. He was hitting people really hard and being able to step back and work again. Against Padley, he was falling in. Now, let's just touch on the weight thing. Like, it was meant to be a lightweight fight, and Chamberlain couldn't make weight. So that's always a worry in terms of, is the attention getting to his head? Then again, it could just be an accident. It could be illness. It could be anything. Desire to make the fight at all costs, and so he sacrificed a bit of his health for performance. Paid a heavy price. Thought Padley boxed it interestingly. I think if you watch the fight back, not once did he fight for the dominant lead foot position. He was more than happy to let Chamberlain have it, and then gamble that he could either block or slide out the way of the left hand, and then find an opportunity to throw his left hook, right uppercut, left hook. So in the first or second round, he let a big left hook go on Chamberlain. And I was like, ooh, how many of those can he land? And he kept landing that shot. It was the shot that he kept throwing. He was less concerned with the jab, but he didn't care what position he was in. He was willing to trade. And so he was able to drop. Yeah, he dropped him with a left hook. He dropped Chamberlain with a left hook. Afterwards, Chamberlain clearly rattled, starts rushing in with the head, loses a point. And at that point, the fight's hard, right? 10-8 round plus a point deduction, and you're not boxing well. So I'm not going to say to him, kick him off TV. No, the whole point of these sorts of defeats is come back again. Like Ishmael Davis should come back again, because that wasn't when he was meant to fight. So let's see Ishmael Davis do something, because I think that there's a talented fighter in there, but he's going to have to do it that kind of Glenn Johnson's way, just being tough and savage and being able to hurt people. But in terms of Chamberlain, what do you do? Do you put him in with a Sam Noakes now? Is that the fight that makes sense? And then winner moves on, and the loser has to kind of rebuild. But has Sam Noakes moved past Mark Chamberlain? That's also another question. I don't know, but if those two fought, I think it'd be an entertaining fight. But does that go on Saudi, or is that one of your your TNT cards now. Can we talk about the paradox or the conundrum that is Joshua Buatsi? So I watched that Willie Hutchinson fight, and at the end of it, I texted a friend of mine. I said, I have no idea how good Josh is. But if you think about it, he's undefeated. He hasn't lost a fight, but he hasn't given us a performance. There hasn't been a performance Josh has given where you're like, oh, okay. None of his performances have been dominant. They've always kind of felt like he's just eked out a win. And that's not borne out by the scorecards either, because he tends to win by quite wide scorecards. But when you watch it with your own eyes, you're like, this guy's one power puncher away from disaster, right? And I wasn't sure if Willie Hutchinson could do it, but what Willie was good at, and he showed it in this fight, was he can punch from anywhere. And he'll hit you when you least expect to get hit. He just lacks the power and that physicality. You saw the difference between them. Like, those two men stood on the scales at roughly the same weight on Friday morning. And to see them in the ring, it was man against boy. Like, Josh looked like he had just been hewn out of granite and finally polished down. Willie Hutchinson didn't. Willie Hutchinson looked like he just come off a building site. And I'm not saying that to be disrespectful. I'm just saying the difference in physicality between those two was the defining factor. It looked like Josh was just able to weather the Hutchinson storm better than Hutchinson was able to weather the Buatsi storm. Like, you know, he got dropped twice. I'm not going to say he was outclassed, but he was out-muscled. There's no question about that. He was out-muscled. And if he's looking to find another level, Willie Hutchinson has to come in a lot stronger than he was. The skills are great, and he's super skillful. His heart is beyond question. I think he impressed everyone by his ability to tough it out when others might have wilted. But I can't look at Josh and go, in terms of British light heavyweights, here's where he is. Because in my heart, I'm like, I think Clinton Woods would beat him. I think Crawford Ashley would beat him. I believe light heavyweight Bellew would beat him. Don't know about Dodson, though. I don't know if Dodson would beat him. But a lot of these guys would beat him. Those old school guys like Dennis Andrews would beat him. Do you know what I mean? Internationally, let's not talk about the Kovalevs and the Viterbias of this world. And they're the names we should be talking about Josh in, because that's what he was aiming for. I think now we've got to be a bit more circumspect and hope that the belts scatter and he gets an okay shot against someone like an aging Pascal, for example. But he's a conundrum. Like I said, I don't know what to make of him. I'm not saying this to be bad. I'm just saying he hasn't given us a signature performance yet. Maybe we have to wait for that. But it'll be good to see that. Maybe Yard's the guy to bring that out of him. Let's see. In terms of Willie Hutchinson, if Dan Aziz gets through his next fight, Dan versus Willie Hutchinson, let's see. That'll be a good test as to whether Willie can cope with that real physicality, or if he's just going to be a slickster that likes to box on the outside and, you know, sort of raid in and out. But that's why I don't mind seeing Dan against Willie Hutchinson. Why not? I think that would be a compelling enough fight in terms of the clash of styles. Do you know what? We're 20 odd minutes into this now. It's only right that I pay tribute to Josh Warrington. If the Anto Kachi fight was his last one, then we should pay tribute to Josh. And I have a love-hate relationship with Josh Warrington. Like, I think, like, the purist in me thinks his style's nasty, thinks he's reckless with his head, lacks power. All these sorts of things you can hammer him for. But the human in me goes, nobody has ever got further with a novice style than Josh Warrington. He boxes like he's never really boxed before. And he's taken all those limitations, and they are because he's not one for head movement or anything spectacular. He just outworks you. He just outworks you, and he grinds you down with work rate. When he was at his best, he made people look stupid. Like, he did it to Selby, he did it to Frampton, he did it to a lot of people. Even in fights he lost, like Galahad, he terrorized people. He was like that world British champion. Definition of a world British champion was Josh Warrington. Did it with Lee Wood as well. And you got to pay tribute to that. That's what you contrast that with what we said earlier about AJ. Warrington made peace with his limitations and said, this is the only way I'm ever going to get to the top. And he just stuck to it. Criticism from people like me didn't faze him. He stuck to it. Didn't change trainers every 2 minutes. Stuck to it. I genuinely think if Josh had been around more people like that, maybe his style would be different, a bit more circumspect and pragmatic. But just pay tribute to Josh Warrington. Great servant to British boxing. Put Leeds on the map. Allowed other Leeds boxers to rise up. In fact, allowed other Yorkshire boxers to rise up. So I one of those moments I'm going to take my hat off to Josh Warrington and say, what a fighter and what a man. Whatever he chooses to do now, entirely up to him. But I'm always going to respect Josh Warrington because he got the maximum out of himself that you could. The maximum. And stayed true to his people. Even when he was taking defeats, stayed true to his people. So respect to him. I hope there's enough in the bank that he can have a good life and he doesn't want for anything anymore. So all the best to him and what he goes on to do in the future. If we talk about the fight, I just don't understand why there was all this noise around Anto Kachi. Don't think he's that good. Definitely doesn't have the power you'd expect for someone of his size. Doesn't have anything clever either. Was just a bit of a disappointment after the Cordina win. But it makes you wonder, how good is Joe Cordina? Like, how good is that? What happened to Joe Cordina? What happened? Are we saying that Joe doubted himself that much, or maybe Joe knew his limitations that much that he had to get on the Conor Ben juice? I'm not saying he did, I'm just wondering. Because he's fallen off a cliff. And they can talk about rebuilding and he'll fight Shakur Stevenson, but he's being fed to Shakur Stevenson if that fight actually happens. Whoever Cordina fights next, he'll be fed to, man. Like, it's sad. But boxing's a cruel game, and that 2016 intake isn't looking as good as we thought it would look. And then lastly, we'll talk about Hamza Shiras versus Tyler Denny. I raised concerns when I talked about the weigh-in, and Tyler Denny looked in awe of Hamza Shiras, and he boxed like it. When there's that much of a height difference and a size difference, like it looked like two different weight classes in there, I was surprised that Denny didn't just focus on the body. He's trying to hit the head, left himself open to getting countered, couldn't do anything off a double jab, had no lateral movement. Denny ended up looking like he was tailor-made for Hamza Shiras, and Shiras made short work of it. Chop, 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 bang. Dropped him twice. Good stoppage win. And he's stopped everyone, kind of at that upper tier of British level. He's stopped everyone that he's faced. Like, there's been a degree of comfort to what he's done. And the thing is, it's not like he's not vulnerable to things. I think if you try and box Hamza Shiras, you're going to get smoked. You actually just have to make it nasty and rough in there for him. You got to move him around a bit. Get him off his rhythm. Get him panicking a bit. Hit him about his arms. Just make it rough in there. And I don't know if we have boxers capable of doing that anymore. There are a lot of guys who don't know ring craft. So they don't know how to do those little things like, look, you might have to put a forearm in on his neck or something, man. Just let him know you're there. Because we don't do that anymore. Our pro system is essentially just amateur plus, which is sad. But in terms of Shiras, let the man have a world title. There's actually no point in holding him back anymore. Put him in for a world title. I don't even mind if he loses, but he's earned the right to do that now. That run of just wiping people out is impressive. So let him have his world title shot. In terms of Tyler Denny, back down to British level. Rematch with Brad Pauls, I don't know. But at that level, why not? Denny could probably still do damage as long as you're not 6'3", 6'4". I think he could still do some damage. But he's also got to reevaluate his game plan. Like, if you're going to be a guy that just bludgeons people, get some footwork. Get some footwork and some forward momentum and you'll be good. But nothing against him. Like, I like Tyler Denny. I just felt the fight was lost at that weigh-in on the Friday when he was just like in awe of Hamza Shiras. And when you're in awe of someone, it just plays on your mind. Okay, cool. So let's wrap up on some stuff so we can, wrap this up in a bow and leave it in the archives for future generations to enjoy. So if we look at Joshua Dubois, the question now is, does AJ retire? I've been saying for a long time, boxers shouldn't retire. You know, admittedly, yeah, the boxing can leave you, but Joshua still has competitive fights he can have that will entertain the public, and it will allow him to say, at least I faced all the people of my generation. As long as he's not trying to get in the Hall of Fame, that's enough for me. So I don't want Joshua to retire. I don't think he's washed up, just like I don't think Joe Joyce is washed up. I think if you get them the right fights, and we just understand that that whole world title thing might not be for them right now, you can have some good, compelling fights. Not too many, but enough that you can ride out on a high. In terms of other stuff, man, as always, huge credit to the Josh Padley fans. Good people from Donny. Listen, if anyone there is listening that was there at the weigh-in, man, who was the short lady with the long brown hair asking for a friend? Man, so massive own goal by Spencer Fearon, right? Imagine this. You've alienated the Dubois family. You alienated Don Charles. So you've basically inserted yourself into a conflict that you thought was there. Turns out isn't there in the way that you described it. And now you basically upset both parties. So you sniffing around for an opportunity there, nah, it's done. Now, here's the thing. I think I said this before. Spencer Fearon wanted paying from Dubois' dad for introducing him to Don Charles. And like I said to you before, that Spencer wasn't the only person that his dad spoke to. So what unique service did Spencer Fearon provide? None. But he wants paying. And then he got upset because the guy didn't pay him. Like, can you imagine someone asks you for directions and you charge them a tenner? Can you imagine someone asking you what time Morrison's shuts and they charge you a $5? Oh, that's desperation. And I feel for him, right? Because if you look, I think I said this before, what's Spencer's lane now? That the Fight is Right podcast, they're doing Porky Russ numbers, right? So they're in the same ballpark as Russ. They're not delivering a premium product. Neither guy has a fighter. They're not wearing fighters' t-shirts to the ring like they used to do when they were mooching off guys like O'Hara Davis, who've moved on to better situations. So what are Tunde and Spencer really doing now? They can't be boxing celebrities. They've alienated so many people that you dare not give them a microphone. And then I'm hoping that the YouTube crowd now just shun Spencer and go, look, mate, it's more hassle than it's worth. It's just more ag than it's worth. Because it led to Don. I've seen Don get angry, but I've seen Don get angry in relation to things he should get angry about. So if a boxer's not keeping their hands up, I've seen Don get angry. I hadn't seen Don get angry the way he was with Spencer, where he was furious. And you could see, he was like, I don't want to see that guy again. You know? And Spencer's there, I've known him since I was 12 years old. Doesn't matter. He violated. That's the only way you can describe what Spencer Fearon did. He violated. Because he was speaking on stuff he should never have spoke on. He wasn't in a position to know, never mind anything else. But greed does crazy things to people. But that Don interview was really good. I felt the Umar one was really, really good. 40 odd minutes, and he got to clap back at the world. I like that he addressed the Derek thing. And I think in time he'll probably reveal more. When it's time to tell his life story, that'll be an interesting chapter. Because people forget, man, this guy rode hard for Derek. Took the shot from David Hay. Do you know what I mean? He handled David better than Derek did. And here you have, like, Derek refusing to pay him allegedly. Paying him lower than he had agreed, allegedly. And that's sad. And this man has had over a decade of pain that no one had wanted to listen to because he didn't have a case study that the public could believe in. Now all of a sudden he does. He's like, no, I don't want to put it out there, but I have to put it out there so people understand that I've been through a lot in this sport. This hasn't just come overnight for me. I put my years in, I put my hours in. And I wish people would understand that when it comes to Don Charles. He's put his work in. And look, there are other trainers that put work in, and I try and shine light on a lot of these guys. You know, the guys who are known, like your Joe G's, your Adam Martins, etc., your Eddie Lambs. I shine light on these guys because it's so fickle that they can be easily forgotten, and they shouldn't be, because they are the lifeblood of this sport. All of these guys, your Michael Jenningses, your Jamie Moores, and yes, I give Jamie a hard time, but Jamie's an important part of the ecosystem. Even Steffi Bull, for all of his sins, part of the ecosystem. And a lot of these guys get shafted because boxers will find the easiest way to get what they want. They don't want to do the hard thing. Suddenly 10% isn't 10% when the money's nice. It's messed up. And Don's right now to start clapping back. And you know what? He could have roasted Anthony Joshua for all the things I know. And when he says he's got video evidence of him training Joshua, that's a fact. And it's not like he's got 3 50-second clips. No. There's a treasure trove of clips of him working with AJ. And if AJ had stayed with him, what could he have achieved? And we know who stopped him. And I've been alluding to this for a long time, where I've said, you know, certain people messed up the opportunity. So I'm happy for Don that he's getting this moment and he's getting stuff off his chest. And he's able to say this. My only thing is, and I always say this to people, when you talk loudly, people may talk loudly about you. That's the only thing. So I hope he stays like spiritually and emotionally safe. I think Don's a good guy. Thought it was a really good interview. If you haven't watched it, it's worth watching. You can see the emotion in Don. Like, he's like, mate, after everything I've been through, I can finally say I trained a world champion. I can now say Don Charles, trainer of world champions. I think he's won belts at all the levels now, hasn't he? Salute to that man. Honestly, salute to that man. To have navigated his way through these choppy waters and done that, I think that's absolutely brilliant. So I'm genuinely happy for him. Just also want to shout out, man, like, some of the trainers who are coming through now and they're trying to, you know, do their thing and they don't get the light shone on them, like Curtis Woodhouse and Will Jones. And I only say them because they're the guys I've kind of recently interacted with. And I love the fact that they're switched on. And I mean, their eyes seem to be focused on the right things. And they seem to be different. Like, I feel like the previous generation, and not all trainers in that generation, but they were quite fish and chippy. And I think we're getting a bit more of a rounded training profile and a lot of diversity in how people want their guys to box. And I think that's only going to be good for British boxing. And also, these are guys who are proactive in getting their guys out there, getting their guys sparring. And that's what's important. I know Will Jones took a bit of stick after the O'Hara Davis Barroso fight, but what happened in that ring wasn't what was discussed or planned. So I say good luck to those guys. Let's keep supporting the up and coming trainers, because they are the lifeblood, mate. Like, you can see how insecure the game is when you're a trainer. So the more support we give them, like, I mean, the better for the sport, in my opinion. One thing I think we all need to start watching out for is if any more of Eddie's golden geese lose. Let's see how long it is until he starts unraveling, because he had a moment. I don't think I talked about this. He had the IFL moment when he got annoyed because Ben Shalom asks to have videos taken down. Now, I'm not buying for a second Hearn doesn't control the interviews he does with Coogan, those sit-downs. I don't buy for a second he leaves anything to chance. Now, whether they get deleted, I don't know. But are there briefing calls beforehand? It wouldn't surprise me. Okay? So he had a shocker then when he's there, you know, shouting and screaming. He had a shocker when he's like threatening to knock Ben Shalom out. And it's like, well, no. Now, there are other people out here who are talking smack about you. Threaten to knock those people out. I will happily put my hand up as a volunteer. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you want to be I don't like bullies. And that felt like he was bullying Ben Shalom. And that's not right. So if Hearn's like, anyone that disrespects me, you know what I mean, I want to knock out, then I'll be here and say, listen, you're a middle-aged prick that has, I don't even care, in fact. Just come and see me. Do you know what I mean? Fuck Eddie Hearn for bullying Ben Shalom. It's wrong. It's disgusting. People think it's banter. It's not. It's bullying, right? If that was you, imagine that was you at work, and there's that guy like the sales director, and he's just shitting on you every day because everyone loves him, and you're there trying to prove yourself, and he's just shitting on you. It's bullying, right? It's bullying. And then what happened? Was it Talk Sport? He was on. So I don't know what day he did this, and he starts blurting out, "Yeah, Simon Jordan's got an economical financial interest in boxer." Like, why are you lashing out at people now? But it's more bullying. Call it what it is. Why aren't boxing fans calling this bullying? Like, Ben's not answering back. Ben's not talking crazy about Hearn. He's like, "Yo, I'm just in my own lane," and it's almost like there's this nasty energy in Eddie Hearn that now that he can't throw it at Frank Warren, he needs someone to throw it at. I said to him, throw it at me, please. Leave Ben alone. Throw it at me. Anytime, any place, throw it at me. And I'm sure there are others who are happy to volunteer for you to throw it at them. Stop being a bully. But it's revealing a lot of things that people have been saying behind the scenes. Hearn is a bully. A control freak and a bully. The white P. Diddy. Don't be surprised if he turns out to be the white P. Diddy. That's what I'm going to say on that. And on that note, I'm going to say, take care, guys. And I can't believe I've done like a whole week of podcasts on one fight weekend. But I said I'd try and get to 250 by year end. I think we might hit it if boxing stays interesting. Take care, guys.